Oh, welcome back, Govinda Kai, for another a round two, as it were. Nice to have. Yeah, I know. So if you're listening at home and you want to subscribe or like it or even receive notifications, please, it's Keen on Yoga, and subscribe, like, or even hit that notification bell. It's 5 a.m. in Seattle, I think, where Govinda's currently at. So let's see how he does at 5 a.m. in the morning. The test of a true yogi is how is he before 10 a.m. without a coffee. Have you had a coffee yet?
No, I have one in front of me though.
Continuing on from our last chat, as we touched on some interesting subjects, I thought, and Govinda is quite radical in his views about yoga and his practice and his years of practice and what it means. He's also over 60, which amazed me at the time, and I got told off my wife for swearing when you told me your age. But it took me by complete surprise that I don't know how old you are, but you're 60 something, which I thought was incredible. So it's a mark of yoga. You've done it. I think you started it, just as a brief background for people that didn't watch the other one we did. I think you started it with Tim Miller, is that right?
I started Ashtanga with Tim Miller, yeah.
With Tim Miller, yeah. In 90s, something like that?
Yeah, the early 90s, thereabouts.
Early 90s.
I discovered yoga practice when I was 18, 19 years old. So I did, I had a, couple day a week Iyengar practice through my 20s.
Yeah, I probably fast forwarded a bit too quickly there. Who was I keep thinking, who is the yogi that you mentioned you went to see in an ashram? Like a kind of well-known yogi, right? You used to go and see someone in an ashram.
This was Swami Muktananda with the Siddha Yoga lineage.
Yeah.
He was one very strong. He was a very strong influence on me, but also I was I got to study quite closely with Sogyal Rinpoche, who is, a very well-known Tibetan teacher.
Incredible teacher. Yeah. Slightly controversial or in controversy over more recent years. I think he's had a little bit of controversy around it, but a wonderful teacher. And in the so which lineage is he? Sakya or Nyingma? I think he's Sakya lineage, isn't he? Tibetan Buddhism. But he's not Kagyu. He's not Geluk. So there's Sakya and Nyingma. He's a Sakya teacher. Yeah. And Plum Village in France. I think he's that's sorry, we're getting all mixed up now. That's Thich Nhat Hanh, but Sogyal has a place. Sogyal has a place in France. He has a retreat in France.
Perhaps
he does. Yeah. So just going back slightly, what about Muktananda then? Well, can you tell us anything about what he was like?
Well, I mean, when I first was introduced to him, I was basically clueless about anything, like any kind of traditional yoga, any teacher from India. I had no idea. It was, I don't know if I think I mentioned it, but I was just attending a junior college there in San Mateo in California, and I had a very kind of very unique personality as a teacher there, and he threw a surprise field trip on us one morning, piled us all into a minibus and took us over to the ashram, which was across the bay in a place called Emeryville. And it was, the event known as Shakti, and so people are lining up.
And what's that then, for people that don't know?
Well, Shakti is like supposedly a ritual or an event in which there's the direct transference of energy from the guru to his disciples or students or whatever. And
did you get it?
So he's sitting up on his chair in the front of the room, and he's got a peacock feather, and he's like tapping people on the head with a peacock feather. So we got into the queue, and we're long time in the queue, and then finally just kneel or stand before him, and he pops you on the head with his peacock feather. So I had no idea.
Did anything happen? Apart from?
I mean,
The obvious.
Nothing dramatic or obvious.
Right. Nothing. Right.
To
Okay.
me, but I
Okay.
was very, very naturally attracted to the energy of the ashram. The kind of meditative quality, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
He used to. There used to be like what they called. He had his own like personal kind of meditation room, and then in the ashram in the basement, directly underneath the his meditation room, was kind of a place for people to gather and to feel that energy. And I remember the first time I went down into that, what they called the meditation cave, and that's when I had the profound experience, where you just sit in some kind of, like, I hadn't been meditating that much. I had some awareness of Zen Buddhist meditation because my father had been practicing Zazen. So I knew about meditation from that sense, but not from the Hindu side. And I just remember sitting there and just kind of sitting down on a cushion and closing my eyes, and then suddenly, feeling myself just going into a relatively, like, and of course wasn't familiar, I didn't know what it was, but I just went into a deep state of meditation. And there's, almost every single time, that time and each time that I went in there afterwards, there seemed to be this like timelessness that appeared. So I would sit, close my eyes, what seemed to be like 5-10 minutes turned into like, it could have been as long as 3 hours, and that was quite remarkable to me. So, and then they are also really big into chanting, simple mantras like Om Namah Shivaya and that kind of thing. And I really, really loved that experience of this, like, whole,
You take that back to your dad and on his zazen cushion. I'm not sure he'd give you a big slap with a stick, wouldn't he?
Right.
Start chanting mantra. What I wanted to say, I mean, we didn't really touch on before, is, I mean, your dad was a well-known figure, right? I mean, from Japan, I think, did you say he brought one form of Aikido or something? Was it kind of over and popularized it in America?
No, well,
is that right?
Well, he grew up with the martial arts. So he was a black belt in both judo and Aikido. And so that was really his passion, so to speak. He was a devoted practitioner, and then he decided he wanted to teach. So he set himself up at the local recreation center in our town and would teach there regularly. And I think that really, even though I wasn't directly involved in the teaching itself, I was, that was kind of his thing that he went off and did. But just that whole dimension of his life, I think really touched me. And especially, of course, when in 1966, when I was 6 years old, he took our whole family over to Japan so he could study with his, kind of guru or his teacher.
So he learned it there.
Yeah.
He learned it in Japan, right?
Yeah.
And he came over. He came over to America, like, to work, or did his family come over prior to that?
His parents immigrated.
Right. Okay.
And he was born in a place called Tacoma, Washington, and then as a child moved then to San Francisco.
Right.
But that was just such a big part of his life, and for him to take us over to Japan, and for me as a 6-year-old to have an experience of living a year in Japan, and be able to, kind of be a witness to that process of, that kind of deep devotional practice and, commitment to his teacher in that way, I think, made such a strong imprint on me, because when I went to India in 95 for the first time, just kind of echoes of his life,
Yeah.
vibrating within
Yeah.
me as I, also, traveled a long way to a strange place. Of course, for him, he's were part of the Japanese culture. Has Japanese ancestry, so it wasn't that strange. But he did. He grew up entirely in the States, and
Mm.
this was his first visit to Japan as well.
I didn't realize when I was researching it later that he actually died when you were quite young, didn't he?
Yes, he
Yeah. Yeah.
died of colon cancer when I was 16, and he was 49.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's quite formative as well as a
Yeah.
difficult experience to kind of rectify. Yeah,
Yeah.
and consolidate. Yeah. Just to get a handle on where you're at and where you've taken these things, because it is a unique kind of perspective that you have on the tradition that you're embodying now in Ashtanga Yoga, and we don't find many people looking at it as a spiritual practice as you do, and you talk about it as a spiritual practice, and the very asana as a spiritual practice. I mean, how has that developed for you, and what does that look like in terms of what you would suggest as a methodology for teaching? Yeah.
I think it was, and I think about this, pretty regularly, the fact that I had the opportunity to go to India, especially in this particular window of time, which was, really before Ashtanga became popular worldwide. And also it was a time in India where there was not as much influence from the West. I remember going to the local grocery store and in India, and there's basically no products that were from overseas. Everything was made in India. There may have been some collaborations between foreign companies and Indian companies, but nothing was manufactured outside of India and brought in.
I think that was illegal. That was a legal requirement for a long time, wasn't it? That you couldn't bring stuff in. I think.
I don't know what the legality was, but that was the reality.
Yeah.
And so I got to experience in India that was not so heavily inundated with both tourists and Western influence. So I feel like I got a chance, and especially during that time when Guruji was still relatively young. He was still in his. The first year that I went in '95 was his 80th birthday, so he still had a lot of vim and vigor, so to speak, and was not was really teaching in a way that he was taught, which was just kind of. There was just an intensity and a directness and a kind of a fearlessness. You could almost say like a kind of a stupidity as well, just it did. Especially to somebody who's been raised in the West, these methods seem like almost at the level of being insane. They just went against all of your sort of common sense. Now, me being kind of Asian and having been introduced to the martial arts at an early age, it wasn't as extreme as I imagine it might be for other Western people. Because I was witness to, again, I was in Japan with my father with his teacher. That was in the 60s, so. Still like full power martial arts. At 16, I was practicing a martial art called Aikido, which is working with a live samurai blade. And you just see like some of the really old school teachers were just like. Obviously I can't speak for how much they mirrored actual traditional samurai warriors, but these guys seem to be of that ilk, basically. They would be like, one thing that happened a lot in class was, you take your sword out in any kind of careless fashion or without full mindfulness, and you could slice your hand right open, right? Because these blades are very heavy and very sharp.
Yeah. Right.
And the old school guys would just cut their hand, and they would, it would be clearly a cut that should require stitches, and they would just wrap a cloth around their hands and keep practicing, like that. So I was introduced to that kind of level of intensity.
I mean, that's something that struck me from the last interview, is the intensity in your approach, which I liked. You liked. I mean, did you think it's simply a background thing that you're kind of raised within this kind of, albeit expat kind of, Asiatic, Japanese kind of traditional background, or do you think it's something in you as well, related to circumstances of your life that, to rehash on our last episode, Govinda, when he started practicing I think you went to a tour of Pattabhi Jois in New York, and used to practice twice a day. I think you'd gone to both classes there, and you were fasting and taking these very hot baths. I think so.
Right.
That really struck me as from the last interview. I remember nothing else. I remember that it was just like there's an intensity of longing there, or something. I mean, can you speak more about that? Like, how did that kind of feel?
I had
the motivation behind it.
I had a chance around in my early 40s. I had a chance to go visit my sort of the place in Japan where my ancestral line is emanated from. And I got to meet one of my relatives who was part of the family that didn't leave Japan. So it was my grandmother's sister family. And she had her eldest son was an 80-year-old guy that was acting as my host when I went to visit there. And, this guy, 80 years old, was a 10th degree black belt in judo. And also he was like a crazy used car salesman. So, and I just was, the first thing that, struck me was this guy's intensity. Like, he was just like so full power that everybody in the family was completely intimidated by him, and he just ruled everybody he came in contact with, basically, So this was
you were a real estate agent yourself, I think, weren't you? So it kind of mirrors you in a way,
right?
But wasn't that your background? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was in real estate appraisal for 12 years.
Yeah.
Starting in my early 20s, but that just struck me because I was like, oh, okay. Now this kind of, it helps me to explain my own like kind of intensity, my own passionate nature, my own like hunger to like experience those aspects of life that are kind of categorized as extreme,
So you think the intensity to practice was coming from a perspective of inquiry, or was it anything also to do with wanting to be more healthy? I mean, obviously, you have that, the fact that your dad died very young, does that have any influence on wanting to be, and you also had chronic back complaints. I remember when you had your real estate business, right? You were suffering badly from back pain. Yeah. Was there an attitude of trying to get yourself stronger and healthier, or was it more framed around this wishing to experience something, like something higher, deeper?
It was always, I mean, as far as I can remember, the main thing that always attracted me was the possibility of some kind of fundamental transformation.
Right.
So if I, for example, I've always been really attracted to having these kind of one-on-one conversation with people, like really
that's lucky.
Upfront, raw, deep, honest.
Me too.
Vulnerable conversations.
Yeah.
So like, what always attracted me is, is the person that I'm going to engage with going to engage with me to the level at which we both can walk away different people, basically. Are we going to reveal something? Are we going to talk about something? Are we going to ask certain questions that cause us to reflect or experience so deeply ourselves in that dialogue that we walk away transformed, right? So obviously I then, of course, a natural attraction for the intense practice of the martial arts, the intense devotion and the intense kind of commitment in terms of yoga, uh, any kind of devotional path, the
Yeah.
chanting, like all of those things attracted me because I saw in them the fundamental possibility of transformation. So that's
Right. And when you
I can't say
to
that I
what,
ever
I
really
suppose.
thought about like health per se. Like, of course I
Right,
want,
right,
of
right.
course
So
I
what were
was.
you transforming? I suppose what's your aim in transforming? I mean, for me, when we talk of that, it immediately conjures up the idea that one is inherently dissatisfied with reality as it is, right? I mean, certain people are happy to go along, get the job, have the family, etc. I mean, you and I have not done the traditional pathways. I mean, that, always seemed unsatisfactory as as an aim or conclusion of life for me. The idea that there was something more to transform to came naturally to me. I mean, and for you?
I think it's just the sense that there is something more, there's something beyond the normal expectation, the normal sort of longings of any regular person. I think there's like, I think about it all the time because for me, one of the kind of most fundamental questions of yoga philosophy or the spiritual literature of Vedic culture is like, what is the highest possibility in human life? Right? What's actually possible? Not like, can I conform and fit into the expectations of my own collective culture, but like, what is possible beyond that? Like, if you're willing to, whatever, pay the price or put in the work, what actually is possible? And that's really
And when you
when.
say possible, what do you mean by it? Like, to be known, or to be an experience to be felt satisfactory or
No,
happy?
I think naturally I just always had a sense of the subtle
Just generally, how
dimension,
far can one
this
go?
the spiritual dimension, like the
Right.
ideas of, that's why, at a very young age, what attracted me to like these kind of alternative diets and living in these kind of like experimental ways was like when somebody introduced me the idea of the possibility of being able to live without eating any food or drinking any water, this whole like dimension that people refer to as breatharian, breatharianism, like that kind of thing really attracted to me, attract me. Or like, when my
Strange.
father
Did you
died
try
out.
it? Did you
Well,
try it?
I never went to that
You like the
extreme,
idea, right?
but
Okay,
I
yeah.
did a lot of things that, probably a lot of people would find kind of sketchy, there's this, for a while there, I was doing this, what's called a gallbladder flush. And what you do with the gallbladder flush is you take first three, it's like a 12-day process. The first 3 days you drink like fresh green juices, and also you're allowed to eat like fresh applesauce. So you just take apples, you peel them, you throw them in a blender, and you eat applesauce, right? So you do that for 3 days. On the fourth day, you drink 8 to 10 ounces of olive oil, and then you drink 8 to 10 ounces of lemon juice. And this creates a cathartic reaction in your gallbladder, and your gallbladder just empties out all of this very strange looking matter. Like when it
It
comes
did.
out,
It worked, did it?
yeah. It comes out, and you
Right.
see these like green gelatinous kind of soft stones come out of your body. So I
How
do
did
that.
anyone come up with that?
Oh, yeah, good question. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like I would just kind of just experiment with
I mean,
apples and
more
olive oil,
crazy
and
people doing crazy things, I think.
I think the thing which kind of attracts me to you a lot, though, is that you're extreme on every end. I mean, you've been extreme with yoga, but I mean, I think you also live life and experiment on all different fronts, right? I mean, you're not
Yeah.
conventional. You're not, you're not conformist, and I think you like your nature, but you also, have liked. I think you've had you've tried all different diets, you've had different relationships, right? You don't just live in a cave, right? You're quite, yeah, I think you've been
Yeah.
quite extrovert in
Yeah.
the way you've lived your life and taught, right?
Yeah.
You're a
Well,
colourful character, let's
as
say.
you know, as my good friend and fellow practitioner, fellow teacher Eddie Stern once told me. He told me, I think the purpose of human life is to have as many diverse experiences as possible, and that just totally struck a chord with me. Because I recognize that also has been a lot of my motivation. Like I want to have as many different kinds of experiences as possible. Why would I want to limit myself to a certain band in the spectrum when it's possible to have so many experiences? That's why, when I suddenly realized I could travel around the world and teach yoga and support myself doing that, it was such a revelation, because I could just go to so many places that maybe as a younger person I never dreamed I would
Mm,
ever go to, and to
mm,
experience
mm.
cultures and experience people and foods and different languages. It just was just, I mean, just a
Yeah,
bottomless kind of hunger for like a diversity of experiences. So it's
I
like
think you have to have. I think you have to have a very open mind for it, though. Which did you always have that sense of courage and open mindedness to experiment and try different things? Because I mean, like people, as you well know, and you've mentioned before, will call you out, point the finger, and you know, you have to have a lot of courage to persevere and be a nonconformist as you are in your thinking, right? I mean, has that been difficult for you to you know, or have you always just not cared about what other people think and done your own thing?
I definitely can't say that I don't care what other people think, because that's, I think that's a part of all of us. So that's, I and in many ways you could say that there's been like uh, a lot of attention paid to what other people think. But I think the thing that mitigated that was just this, I don't know, it's like a natural, voracious hunger to just find out for myself. So it's sort of like, why would you listen to somebody else's advice when you can just go and experience yourself? I know
Fair enough. Yeah, yeah.
that's not very normal, but it's like it just naturally seemed much more fulfilling and rewarding to go and have directly the experience yourself. There's something about like, you know, of course, oh, don't
Well, I
touch
suppose
the
it's
fire. Don't
yeah, I
touch the
suppose it's
fire
prediction,
because
isn't
you're
it?
going to
It's
learn.
yeah. Like yes, just learning from other people. Like I mean, and I suppose this would segue onto your own perspective on Ashtanga yoga vis-a-vis the energetic transmission that you mentioned before. You believe in from Pattabhi Jois and the extreme methods, and you were a fully committed, signed up, student in that, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
many
yeah,
people would obviously say, like, there's people getting injured left, right, and centre. And you should probably listen to other people, but you wanted to experience, and you went there full on and involved yourself completely with this method, right? And kind of,
yeah,
but from your own mouth, say that it did kind of break you down, but your experience of it was that it was a very positive transformational experience,
yeah,
right? In
yeah,
going through
yeah,
this,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I think
and
it's just like a I don't I it's funny to talk about it because I'm not like like it seems like I would be that kind of person who like doesn't care what other people think and has this kind of like uh courageousness or whatnot, but it's just I I don't know if it's just that. It's like it's almost like, I don't know if it's like, I would almost say like, well, there must have been some like past life immersion into some kind of spiritual discipline in which I recognized the kind of unreality of this human life, because I've been in situations a number of times in my life where I thought that I was going to die, you know, or at least be like severely compromised physically and mentally. And my inner response always has been, well, maybe that's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad to go insane. You know, maybe it's not so bad to lose my life and, you know, lose this physical body and become spirit. Maybe it's not so bad. I don't know how, you know, like it always like made me wonder, like how almost everybody you meet thinks death is a bad thing when nobody actually knows what happens.
Mm.
Maybe it's fantastic to die, you know? Nobody really knows, but everybody automatically assumes that it's a horrible thing and you should resist it as much as you can.